Pues muy buenas tardes a todas, a todos. Muchísimas gracias por su asistencia. Entiendo que hay traducción y etcétera, ¿no? Porque la conferencia de Luigi, desde luego, va a ser en inglés y es un honor para nosotros presentar el día de hoy aquí a Luigi Zingales. Luigi Zingales es un profesor distinguido McCormack de Emprendimiento y Finanzas y un fellow de la Facultad Harper en la Escuela de Negocios de la Universidad de Chicago. Como ya escuchamos a nuestra presentadora, su investigación se orienta sobre todo a temas de gobierno corporativo, desarrollo financiero, economía política y los efectos económicos de la cultura. Ha escrito 2 bestsellers que son Saving Capitalism from the Capitalists, Salvando el capitalismo de los capitalistas, que ya con el puro título es bastante provocativo, que escribió con Raju Rajan, y Un capitalismo para la gente, A Capitalism for the People, en 2012. En 2014, Luigi presidió la Asociación Americana de Finanzas y en julio de 2015 fue nombrado director del Centro Stigler para el estudio de la economía y el Estado en la Universidad de Chicago. Desde enero de 2018, él ha presentado un podcast muy influencial, muy influyente, si alguien lo ha escuchado, que se llama Capitalism, y que explora las formas en las que el capitalismo está funcionando, no está funcionando y qué se puede hacer para mejorarlo. Luigi es economista de la Universidad de Bocconi, en donde concluyó sus estudios en 1987 y tiene un doctorado en economía del MIT. La verdad es que es un honor tener a Luigi aquí. It's an honor to have you here. Luigi, thanks so much for joining us and for bringing us your perspectives into this event. I am absolutely positive there will be really productive and really useful to think about the ways we're doing things here in Mexico, especially in this sector where we're managing about 20 points of the Mexican GDP. It's what the Afores are managing. So I think that questioning what can we do to fix our capitalist rules is something really useful for us. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, David. Thank you for the invitation. I have to apologize because in spite of my last name, I don't speak Spanish. I speak Italian, but not speak Spanish. So you'll be forced to listen to me in English with an Italian accent, which is a terrible combination, but that's what I can offer. So what I want to start doing is, first of all, start from a bit the distilled knowledge I accumulated in many years of studying the capitalist system. And some of that might seem benign, but it's actually quite important in today's economy. So in spite of the fact that I teach at Chicago, I do believe that capitalism is not a natural outcome. It's something that needs to be constructed and maintained. Some of my most famous colleagues and late colleagues at Chicago actually did believe that if you do nothing, you actually eventually, the pure laissez-faire will lead to a good capitalist system. And I think that this is not true. And it's particularly important to remind this today because there are still people that think that. In a sense, he arrived only second in yesterday's election, but one of the candidates in Argentina is actually what is called anarcho-capitalist that believes that everything should be left to the market place, including the rules themselves. Now, what these people don't really specify is under what system the competition for rules will take place. But the competition for rules doesn't work very well. And actually, let me indulge you in an interesting story to prove you why this doesn't work very well. One of the ultimate anarcho-capitalists was the founder of the so-called Silk Road, not the famous Silk Road in China, but the Silk Road, a website in the United States and all over the world where you could buy anything you wanted. You could buy sort of drugs of any type. You could buy. He was a libertarian, and he said, "Oh, I impose some rules in my marketplace, but I compete with other websites, and there is no authority past me because we are in the internet." And of course, he was enamored with the Bitcoin, so everybody was paying Bitcoin. It sounded like the ultimate example of the freedom with no restriction whatsoever. Except that one day, one supplier of drugs blackmailed him because, drugs are not fun to be consumed in the virtual world. You need to consume them in the physical world. So they need to be delivered. And so one of the suppliers kept track of the delivery addresses. And so all of a sudden, he had the addresses of all the clients of your website. And so he did a blackmail. Now, if you, number one, believe in government, you can ask the government to put him in jail, but he doesn't believe in government. Most importantly, he was in a criminal business, so he couldn't call the government. And he was smart enough to understand, wait a minute, if I start paying now, people will ask more and more. So the only choice he had was what? To kill him. So he hired a contract killer to get rid of this guy. Now, was stupid enough to contract an FBI agent, so ended up in jail. But this is a long story to say that even the most fanatic of this end up confronting for the fact you need rules. You need rules, and so the second important point that is even more subtle than the first is actually the large capitalists are not really in favor of having these rules. Because if you're a large capitalist, you get your way no matter what, and the rules are kind of something that you need if you are not that big. And so that's where the book that I wrote with Raghu Rajan 20 years ago came from, is the large capitalists don't really want a competitive market system with rules that function. And there is a real tension that a good capitalist system is a system where everything is for sale except the rules themselves. Okay? But then who decides the rule? In an ideal world should be the people. However, we don't live in an ideal world, and the people have other things to do in their life. They spend all the time monitoring the rules. So there is a real tension between the fact that to function, a capitalist system should have rules that are designed and enforced in an impartial way, but in practice, there is nobody really pushing for this, because I want competition in the other sectors where I buy from, but I don't want competition in my sector. And so the weakest lobby is actually a lobby for the market itself. And I've been struggling with this tension for many years. So 11 years ago, I wrote this book, A Capitalist for the People. And in that book, I had one great intuition, unfortunately 4 years too early, but I had great intuition that if you look at the United States, the situation was getting so degraded and so people were so unhappy that some form of populism was inevitable. I have a chapter in that book that say populism is inevitable, and the question is, which form will it take? Now, I wrote it in 4 years too early because it was 2012, and believe it or not, Mitt Romney almost got elected president in 2012. Today, Mitt Romney cannot even get re-elected as senator of Utah, for Christ's sake, and at the time was about to be president of the United States. This gives you a sense of how the world has changed. Why? Because populist movement came into picture, but it came in 2016 and my book was in 2012. And that's the course of being too early. But the hope that I had in that book, which failed miserably, was the hope of saying, look, there is this resentment against the system even in the United States. And that resentment might be channeled in some form of pro-market populism. If people are upset and they want a change, either they subvert the market or you teach them that what they need to do is not subvert the market, but subvert the people who rule the market today because the market is not fair. And so I had this idea of the pro-market populism, and I think it failed miserably. Okay? So I'm still in search for which is the lobby that might push for a system that works. And preparing this talk today, preparing last week the talk for today, I realized that actually the pension funds might have one characteristic of being potentially a lobby, not what I call pro-business, but pro-market. Because lobby for pro-business is just for the interest, the narrow interest of that particular business, and if it's large, has a lot of interest and that distort the system. A lobby pro-market is a lobby that tries to create the rules for having a competitive system that works well in the long term. But as I just explained to you, this is something that benefits everybody a little bit, nobody a lot. And when something benefits everybody a little bit but nobody a lot, it's very hard to find a proper lobbyist. And I know lobbying has this kind of negative characterization, but in a democratic system, if you lobby, lobbying is an essential function, and if you do it for the greater good of the country long term, this is not only a good thing to do, it's a fantastic thing to do. And so let me tell you why I think that potentially the pension funds overall has this possibility. Number one is because over time, not in 97 when they got started, but now and even more in the future, they are sufficiently powerful to exercise some influence in how things are done, but not so powerful, at least yet, that they find it convenient to distort the system to their own advantage. They are sufficiently interested in the well-being of the Mexican economy overall to actually have a longer-term perspective. They are not here to just do a deal short-term. They are here, number one, to provide a pension to all of you in the future, and that's very important. And the only way for having enough money to provide a pension in the future is that the Mexican economy grows. There is no alternative to that. And to make it grow, you have to have a system that works better. So I think that there is the potential of that. And I think that the first direction in which they should lobby is, number one, to reduce the requirement of invest just in government bonds. I know that government bonds are yielding a nice real yield today, so there might be a strategic choice in this moment to be invested massively. But really, if the majority of the assets of the pension funds is in government bond, you are failing the real goal of the reform. The real goal of the reform is to say we cannot afford to have a pay-as-you-go system in a country that is aging, okay? And so we need to invest in the real economy in order to give future generation a claim on real asset, not only a claim on other younger citizens, in order to pay the pension. Because I come from a country in which this was not done, and it's a disaster, okay? Italy has not grown in GDP per capita in the last 25 years, okay? this is a case unique in the history of humankind, of a developed country that stopped growing. And the effects are devastating, and every young person with a brain is leaving Italy. When I left 35 years ago, I was the exception. Today, it's the rule. Okay, so you don't want to be trapped in a situation like this 30 years from now. And so how we are not trapped with that is you need to have pension funds not tax the future generation, because if you invest in government bonds, at the end of the day, government bonds are just taxes on the future generation. So it's not really solving this problem. You need to invest in real assets that will support you when you're old, and that also invest in a system that makes the Mexican economy grow. So that's the first thing. The second, that is almost the derivative of that, is once you have to invest in a lot of real assets, you need to have some say on how those assets are managed. So in today, sort of Mexican public market, the controlling shareholders tend to have most of the votes and tend to elect 100% of the board of directors. And as a result, there is very little that the average guy in the economy can say, can transmit, and very little that the pension fund can say except voting with their feet. However, this is the paradox. If you are a Mexican pension fund, where do you go? You can't vote with the feet and go completely in the United States. First of all, the current law do not allow you to do so, but even if you are to try, will make no sense that you are all invested in the world economy, and would be a loss for Mexican economy. So you're basically in a forced marriage with the Mexican economy, and if you have to make a forced marriage work, you need to talk, okay? You can't have a forced marriage to work if you don't talk to each other. In this moment, it's not only you don't talk to each other, there is a boss that say what you're doing, and you simply take it or complain, but that's it. So I don't think very much of Italian institution, and rarely I take Italy as an example. But Italy, when it went through privatization in the mid-90s, introduced an interesting idea, which is to say, we want to bring on the board of publicly traded companies some representatives that are not appointed by the large controlling shareholders. Because if you are appointed by a large controlling shareholder, you can be the best guy in the face of earth, but you have a boss, and you know that if you say something the boss doesn't like, you're not appointed anymore. So if you don't want to be on the board, you choose not to be on the board. If you want to be on the board, you want to be reappointed on the board. The only way to be reappointed on the board is to say always yes to the boss. So you're basically a yes man. And if you go for diversity, the only thing you have is you have yes woman, but doesn't really change the substance. How do you change the substance? Is you have institutional investors having the right to appoint 1, 2, 3 people, not the majority, but 1, 2, 3 people on the board, and they choose who they appoint. I had the fortune of being a representative of Italian institutional investors in a telecom company in Italy. And by mistake, never happened before, and it will never happen after, but by mistake, they appointed me as the head of a compensation committee. And I bargained with the CEO. The CEO was out of his mind because he had no control over me. And I said, look, I want the company to succeed, but I don't want to give away money of the company to you. And that was unheard of because all the other people were appointed by basically him or by his cronies, and so responded to him. So I think that the role that the pension funds together can have in selecting, training, socializing, and also punishing in a social way those board of directors is crucial. Because let me tell you a little secret. If you are alone in the board of directors, you tend to be co-opted pretty quickly. Why? Because you're surrounded by a lot of smart people, and they all think alike. Why? Because they're being appointed there to think alike. And if you are the only odd bird on the board, it's very hard for you to resist, especially if when you go out to dinner, you go to other dinner with the same people, and you end up in the same circle, and so on and so forth. So one of the tricks that some of the Italian pension funds did is to appoint people like me who don't live in Italy. And so I didn't have to share the same social circle as the CEO. I could tell the CEO that I want his stock option to have a higher strike price, and then fly back to the United States and say bye-bye. Okay, so that was my strength. And so if you not only appoint these people, but you train them. Today, nobody is trained to go on board. Nobody is trained how to ask the right question to protect the collectivity. I'm doing some study on, in Italy, there was a major bridge near Genoa that fell down. Okay? Collapsed. Why? Because it was under-maintained by a company that was a publicly traded company. And the interesting fact is that 5 years before, the company brought to the board the fact that that company was a risk. And the board members said nothing. Okay? And the bridge collapsed. Why? Because they were not trained how to ask the question, how to create enough disruption for things to change. But you, as an institution, as a collective, can have the thing so that we're going to appoint only people who are not part of the club. We are going to train them before they go on the board, and we're going to evaluate them at the end, how they behave, and then create a community that really can change that. Number 3, you can, as a collective of pension, force other issues on the board. Sorry, other issue on the board, yes, but more directly at the shareholders meeting. You have the power to nominate, to bring issues at that level, and to have a vote, and a public shaming. And this is really important to incorporate a broader set of needs that today are not met at board. So I give you an example. The shareholders of Pfizer and Moderna proposed the idea of sharing the vaccine for free, the vaccine against COVID for free, in the African country, given the poverty of Africa. And what is interesting, 22 or 23% of the shareholders voted in favor of that proposal. So it was not a majority, so it didn't change, but at least started a conversation going. In the United States, for all too long, this proposal were not allowed to be discussed at the shareholder meetings. So in the 1970s, some shareholder brought at the shareholder meeting of Dow Chemical a proposal of saying, we don't want our company to sell the Agent Orange to somebody who might use against human beings. Translated, in case you are so young that you don't remember the Vietnam War, the US government. Okay, the US government was buying the Agent Orange, who is very poisonous, and dumping them on the forest that was habitated, and so killed hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese as a result. And if this was brought to a vote, maybe things would have been different. But there wasn't, the SEC prohibited this from being on the ballot. I think that if you represent the people, because after all, the pension funds represent the people of Mexico. Represent the people of Mexico with a stake in the success of the Mexican economy. So they are not there just politicians to disrupt the system or to get some sort of a brownie point or some votes. They're there to make the system better. But making the system better means making the Mexican economy more productive, but not at the cost of killing people. Because killing people are the very people that want a pension. it doesn't help you to have a healthy pension if you're dead. And so I think that the number one priority is to make sure that these companies are run to maximize profit, but also with the interest of the collectivity at large, not to maximize profit dumping sort of pollution along the river, or not maximize profits by corrupting the government and distorting the system and so on and so forth, or maximizing profit by spreading false information in the system. So I think that the combination of having some representative of the board and to have people that can present proposal at the shareholder meeting is a best mechanism to prevent companies to go wrong. You know, tobacco companies in the United States knew that tobacco killed you 50 years ago. And they spent the better part of these 50 years to trying to convince you of the opposite. And convince you with their own money. That's the irony. That we appoint people to misinform us and kill us in name of our interest. And that's true for Exxon. I recently discovered that at the board meeting of Exxon 1979, the best scientists went to Exxon board members and they said, you know what? If the climate change is real, is caused by man, is caused mostly by carbon fossils burning. 1979. And what did Exxon do in the 1990s? Hire a bunch of fake scientists to spread misinformation in order to continue the way it is. I think the role of good governance initiated by pension fund is to say, we want to maximize profits because we need to maintain you long term, but we want to maintain you means you need to be alive. We don't want you to do things that are to the detriment of the people of Mexico. And that's the unique position in this that you are. Now, of course, you can be an effective instrument for change only at two conditions. Number one is that you eat your own cookies, so that you practice the same governance that you ask others to do to yourself. So you want to open and have some minority shareholders or minority appointed shareholders at the Afore board that represent the pensioners. Because after all, those are the ones with the highest issues at stake. And so you want to have this representation, and you want to discuss with this and with your pensioners what are your voting guidelines. Because at the end of the day, you have an enormous power to vote at the shareholders meeting. You want that power to be exercised in the interest of your pensioners, which is in part, of course, financial interest, but not just financial interest. And so how do you find out? You discuss with your pensioners what are the guidelines. So that's the number one thing. The number two things is, and I think you're practicing this, but is never enough, is you want a maximum transparency in what you do, both in your investment, in the corporate governance of your investment, and I think you have a lot of steps that you have done, and you provide me some evidence that in partnership in which you invest, you bring more people on the board in order to make a difference. But I think this is very important. The third and last point, and then I will open for questions because I'm sure you have a lot of questions. There is an old saying that, you know, it's not that politically correct anymore, but hopefully in Mexico you're going to let me use it. That goes back to the time of Rome, and Caesar was saying that his wife should be held at a higher standard. So the story is that the wife of Caesar was blamed to have cheated on Caesar and was under trial. And Caesar defended her, saying that was not true. And after they won the case, he divorced her. I said, wait a minute, you defended me and now you divorce him? I said, yes, because as a wife of Caesar, you should not only be honest, you should be above any doubt that you're honest. And because you fail on that metric, I divorce you. Now, I don't know whether this is myth or reality, but the point I'm saying, as representative of the interest of the people of Mexico, as Afores, you should be held at the standard of Caesar's wife. You should not only be honest, but not giving even the appearance that you not might be honest. And this is true not only in the way you manage the fund, I know you are very strictly regulated, but also in the type of interaction you have with the political system, and particularly in the type of lobbying you're doing. Because, as I said, you need to lobby in the interest of the people of Mexico, in the interest of your pensioner. But there is the temptation to lobby for some advantages that might be an advantages to the manager of the fund or to some particular family, not to the system at large. Any attempt in that direction will make you lose the credibility that you have, and will even have more as things evolve, to make Mexico the best place to do business. So I think you have a very, very high mandate, and I'm sure you will live up to this expectation. Thank you.
I really appreciate your lecture here, Luigi. I think it was extremely provocative. I don't think a lot of us had ever seen the sector as a lobbying power with such power, as a lobbying force with such power that could actually manage to put the incentives on the right place for long-term growth, for a long-term good performance of the Mexican economy. And by the end, I was making myself a question while you were speaking, but at the end, you sort of answered it with a particular way, which is the internal governance of the Afores. How should the internal governance of the Afores be in order for it to actually create this logic in the markets? And one of the things you mentioned was, including pensioners, which is something that, of course, would need a lot of discussion. It's also very provocative. But what are the things you think that should happen in the inside of the Afores so their participation in different boards doesn't actually get as co-opted as the examples you were putting? Because the way I see the ecosystem, I think that even if that was the case, pretty quickly there would be a lot of short-sightedness to on the profit side. So what would need to happen other than this idea in the governance of Afores? That's something I would like to put on the table for you, and of course to open the panel for questions from the audience. I don't know how we're gonna work that. I don't know if they're just gonna raise their hands or it's gonna be like, right? So I don't know if you want to begin with that.
I would like to answer this question because it's a very important question and not an easy question to answer. Because I am not a very big lover of because it's co-determination that takes place in Germany, where you have the unions appointing a fraction of the board, okay? And I'm not a big lover because number one, nobody discussed this, but it's just for the local unions. And so if you are Volkswagen, you have the German unions represented, but you don't have the union of the workers in the United States represented. So it's very racist as a system, and that's not great. But the second part is that if you have this cooptation, can really lead to a lot of corruption even in Germany. We always think that Germany is this clean country. I think it's more a myth than a reality, to be honest, because I've been studying all these scandals, and Volkswagen is a gift that keeps giving, because they have scandals over and over and over again. And one of the most interesting one is that they were basically paying off the leader of the union with prostitutes in various countries. They have a system organized where every time there was a travel, they would provide also the prostitute, and surprise, surprise, the union leaders were happy to vote with management. And in the process, they designed a defeat device that, in estimated terms, killed more than 1,000 people around the world, okay? Because they cheated on the level of emission of NXO2, and if you do there are some studies that document that the extra thing that they emitted killed 1,000 people. So I think that you need to have a very transparent and challenging system to appoint them. But I think that in this particular case, you now start to have real pensioners, so people that are retired and they start living with those proceeds. Those are the best people, because number one, they have a lot of free time, and number two, they depend on the success of the fund. So I don't see better people than them to be represented at the head, not at the head, but on the board of some of your Afores. So I not given a lot of thoughts, but my thought is, why don't you have a real election among all the retirees, that they appoint 2 or 3 of these people with a maximum number of years that they can stay on the board, so that they learn how to do it, because the first year you're not very effective, but you know, by year 9 or 10, you're completely corrupted. So after I was for 7 years on the board of Telecom Italia, I decided to stop being there, because I became part of the fixture. I wasn't an outsider anymore, I was part of the system. So I think you want a system like that, where you have elections by the real beneficiaries with issues at stake. And I'm actually more and more enamored of how much simple people, when they have their interests at stake, deliver phenomenal answers. So you'll be surprised by how much time and effort these guys dedicate to that. And the other thing that I forgot to say, which is also very important, is very often when you are put on a board of a company, actually very often, all the time, you are abandoned there. Why? Because there is a confidentiality requirement, and so all of a sudden you are alone with 8 other sharks. And not only you have 8 sharks, but the sharks in chief has thousands of employees who work for him or her, most of the time it's a him, 24/7. So when I was on the board, I was challenging something that the CEO was saying. They literally had consultants against consultants. They were spending our money to basically defeat me. And I could not hire even a lawyer. When it comes to economics, I can defend myself. But when it comes to Italian law, I studied a little bit many years ago, but I need a lawyer. I couldn't hire one. So if you have just 3 or 4 people of staff that support your appointee on the boards of the various companies, you can really do wonder, really do wonder.
Thanks so much. I mean, in maybe in our case, the thing is, retirees stop being our clients. I mean, like they have no stake, but I get the point, because
no, but wait a minute. But the retiree don't receive the proceeds from that.
Yeah, but he receives it like in one.
No.
Yeah, and then he goes. No, then he goes to another company that it's the accumulation one that will. It's the one.
It's a separate company.
That's
okay.
right.
So maybe you have to. Then you have to make it to older workers, because young workers don't think about pensions. But when you start to get into your 50s, then pension is really, really important to you. Yeah. And hopefully you have the kids out of the house, so you have more time to dedicate to this, because if you have 3 kids at home, you can't do that. And then maybe you can serve that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I saw the hand of Arturo. He's the CEO of Afore Pro Futuro. I don't know if there's someone else.
Thank you very much, David. And Professor, thanks for your lecture. I mean, remembering the name of your lecture, the social capitalism, no? And the investment of the pension funds and all institutional investors in the world have in some way democratized the capital, yeah, and the participation in the capital of the world. How do you foresee, or what are your thoughts? How can we engage more our pensioners, our clients, with the idea to promote investment and development of our countries, and they be part and they feel part of this this? I mean, no.
It's an excellent question, and I think that the answer is by making them feel that they can make a difference, because they can make a difference. I don't believe in marketing without substance, also because that's fraud, but not even try down that path. But I think that you said correctly that pension funds have democratized the equity investment, and you're absolutely right, but my point is not enough. Not enough, because at the moment, much of the focus of the pension funds have been on the investment side, which is very important. I don't want to asset allocation and asset picking. But moving forward, a lot of the asset picking would be basically delegated to indexing, so that would be reduced. There is a bit of asset allocation, which is important, but it's not something that keeps you busy a lot of time. The really, really important stuff you can do for the future, particularly in a country like Mexico, is the governance. And the governance is not only saying how to maximize its profits, it's also how do I run this company in a way that don't pollute my backyard, or don't corrupt a politician, or don't rig the rules of the auction so that only one guy will always be the winner. And I think that with the support of your pensioners or your workers, that will be your pensioners, you can channel their information, their request into companies. I think that having been on boards, having studied all the shareholder proposal, etc., I see that a lot of times individual shareholders have very good ideas that are dismissed. I was talking with a lawyer of the SEC in the United States a few years back, and he told me that as a young lawyer, he was in charge of basically dismissing shareholder proposals by various groups. And once he went to his senior partner and said, look, this proposal makes a lot of sense. And the answer was, I don't let some F-nuns tell me how to run the business. And I said, wait a minute. I don't particularly love the nuns. I was raised Catholic, and so as a result, I am a little bit anti-clerical, as everybody was being raised Catholic. But when the nuns invest in your company, they have the right to express an opinion, and very often, in some issues, they are more right than the CEO of the company. So you want to help convey that information. And if you give a sense of ownership, the sense of ownership is not only seeing your return going up, which is important, is also seeing make a difference. After all, if I am an owner, I'm not only the right to receive the dividend, I have the right to make a difference. And so you should empower your your workers to actually have some say in these companies, have some say in the interest of Mexico at large. Because, as I said, the beauty of this is these are not going to be radical people who want to quickly get something, because they know they pay out of it. When they say, we don't want to sell guns to Russia, for example, okay? You say, do you realize that this will cost you because your return on investment is going to be slightly less? But many people say, yes, I'm prepared. I don't want to starve when I retire, but I don't want to become rich by selling guns to Russia or to people that kill around the world. So I think that making workers feel that they have some say is ultimately in empowering them and making them more attached to the institutions than just delivering them a return.
Thank you, Professor. I don't know if there's something else. It's hard for me to see with. Me cuesta trabajo, perdón, ver con las luces. Entonces, si me ayudan.
There was a woman there. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you, David, and thank you, Luigi. Very provocative. A question you mentioned for the Afore.
¿Podrías decir, perdón, nombre? Es que no, de acá no.
María Calderón, de
Gracias.
Market Access. The question is, you mentioned for the Afores to diversify away from government bonds and to invest in the real economy. What are some of the steps that they would take to be more invested in the real economy?
I think that the simplest step is to have the government reduce the mandatory fraction that is invested in government bonds. And then I think that would be a natural pressure to diversify. And in anticipation for that, I think that supply will come. And since the Mexican market is relatively small, because historically the demand for equity was more. But as the demand for equity will increase, I think that there will be more and more companies accessing the equity market. And in between, I think many Afores are doing private equity. Private equity is more tricky because you need to be much more careful on the transparency issue. But there is a lot you can do, including important structural investment. And so having the workers realize that they participate in structural investments that will make Mexico a better place to live, I think that gives everybody a sense of pride. And so I think that communicating that to them is important. At the moment, I don't think that that's done enough.
Thank you. No veo. Allá, ¿dónde? Me señalan, pero no veo a quién. ¿Podrías decir nombre, por favor?
Claro que sí, Aldrin Castro de Afore Sura. Thank you very much for this conversation, Luigi. From your point of view, I mean, we at Afore Sura, we have appointed some independent directors in different companies, and we try to level up corporate governance very much. From your point of view, would it be okay if Afore Sura get together with Afore Pro Futuro or any other asset manager and discuss these matters and maybe appoint together some independent directors? Would this be considered something crossing the line, or would it be okay to do it?
That's an excellent question. So again, I build a bit on my experience in Italy. So as a board member of Telecom Italia, I was proposed as a board member by the Association of Italian Mutual Fund. The good news is the Association of Italian Mutual Fund at the time did not have a lot of equity stakes, so they were directing mostly the vote of foreign funds. And so there was a committee formed by the association with other foreign members that were selecting the candidacy. And we faced the issue that you raised. How can we sometimes have a communication with our appointee? Now, with the fund that appointed us, now this is tricky because the communication can only be one way. So as a board member, you cannot talk to other people because you're breaching the confidentiality and you're making somebody else an insider. So either you bring it in technical beyond the wall and he's registered, he cannot trade, or you cannot share that information with him or her. Now, of course, most of you guys trade, so bringing behind the wall is a disaster. Nobody wants to do it. So how did we solve that problem? We had open meetings in which the various funds and some journalists will participate to a conversation in which the various funds were telling the directors what they thought was their opinion about the company, and the directors were asking very generic questions, but in front of everybody. As Brandeis say, the sunlight is the best disinfectant, so if you do that openly, there's no risk of collusion, because one of the issues that you're going to confront, especially as you become bigger and powerful, is that people say, wait a minute, one of the interests you might have is to get together to collude to fix prices, because I can make an example in the United States, but if I am BlackRock and I own 20% of United, 20% of American, and 20% of Delta, I tell American, Delta, United, don't fight on prices, raise prices, I make more profit, right? As a, that's called a phenomenon of common ownership. That's a real risk. However, that cannot be done in the sunlight. That's the reason why it's so important to do everything in the sunlight. Because the moment I were to say half of that, in the United States, I was straight to jail. And most people don't like to go to jail, so we were restrained from doing that. So I think that the answer is yes, you need to create those institutions to provide feedback, but also, as I said, to provide support and also to provide role models. Because if you are a single independent director in a large company, you are a bit like a Japanese in the jungle fighting World War II after it ended. Okay? You are absolutely alone. And you can be as aggressive and as good as the Japanese, you go nowhere. Okay? So you need a broader support, and you need sort of role model, and you need a reputation so that when you step down after the 5 years or the 6 years that you are there, you are appointed maybe to another company, or you are recognized as having done well, because the alternative is the sum of the companies on which you're on the board. They are appointed in another company. When I was on the board of Telecom Italia, a board member said, oh, you're a bright guy, do you want a board on one of my companies in New York? And I said, you know, I'm too busy. When I step down from Telecom Italia, maybe we can talk about this. In this moment, no. And sure enough, when I stepped down from Telecom Italia, he never came back to me. So it was clear a qui pro quo that is regularly done everywhere in the world. So it's not unique to Italy, it's not unique to the United States, it's not unique to Mexico, it's everywhere. But that's exactly the kind of relationship you need to break to broaden up the country. Mexico is a country of 127 million people run by a very small group of people. And you need to broaden up that and use this as a method to broaden up. I think that that's, these days in the United States, the only thing that you look at is diversity by gender and race. And I say, we need also diversity of background. If you are a worker for most of your life and then you go on a board, you being a prospective, you might be male, but you being a prospective that is much more diverse than the perspective of a woman who belonged to the same elite. And I'm not saying I voted in favor of women on board in Italy, so I'm not against diversify on that metric, but I'm saying that's not the only metric you should diversify. You should really pay attention to diversify the background, because you learn more. I think that you have a perspective that is different, and unfortunately, we, at every level, we tend to go more and more in a small world. The irony is that it's not that Mexico is becoming like the United States. The United States is becoming like Mexico. The United States is becoming run by a small elite, that they know each other, they say, and I belong to that elite, so I'm not a complainer. I'm complaining because I don't think it's right. And I think that if we want a real capitalism for the people, we need to broaden this horizon, also in the pool of people we bring on. And of course, people need to be trained, because they might not know the jargon or might not know the rules of the game. So you need to train them. You should not take somebody from the street and throw him on the board without any training. It would be a disaster. But I think that the most talented can be brought in and bring a lot of different perspectives that are very useful.
Thank you, Professor. And I mean, I don't know if there's any more questions, but we're almost out of time. So I would like to use, unless there's some very pressing question, I would like to use this time to give you maybe some closing remarks, Professor, that you want for the time that we have left.
So I think that the challenge that we have in the 21st century is how to manage capitalism in a way that benefits everybody. I think that the history of capitalism up to this moment has been an history where we have seen enormous progress, not just in a few countries, but all over the world. However, much of that progress has taken place under very special conditions. You know, the biggest and the best period for the West was when the West was threatened by the Soviet Union. Why? Because that threat made the people running the West being a little bit more far-sighted than just getting the maximum bang for the buck in the short period of time. And everybody says that capitalism has been great because it has lifted out of poverty 1 billion and change of people. Most of them has been lifted in China, where you have capitalism, but with a lot of, it's not the capitalism that we normally talk about. I think that Mexico is a pleasant exception because it has been a country where there's been enormous progress, and enormous progress without the threat of the Soviet invasion and without a government that is as intrusive as the Chinese government. So in that sense, you're very fortunate, but I'm telling you, it's not easy to continue that way unless you make the system more fair, you create a level playing field that has the buy-in of a majority of the population. And I think that this should be a political objective, but it also should be the business objective of Afore, because you are here for the long term by construction, and you will be able to provide retirement to all the people sitting here and even younger people only with a successful growth of the Mexican economy. And if you end up being falling in a trap like the trap Italy fell, that did not grow for 25 years, you are in trouble, okay? And you want to think about this now, because 25 years from now is too late. So I think you have a fantastic opportunity to make a difference, and Afore is phenomenally positioned to take advantage. So I'm sorry to say, but this is your opportunity to lose. Thank you.